In this video, we'll explore a work by the Neoplatonic thinker Porphyry titled On the Cave of the Nymphs in the Odyssey. It is a philosophical interpretation of a brief yet curious passage in Book 13, lines 102 to 112 of Homer's Odyssey, which presents a detailed depiction of a cave located on Odysseus' native island, Ithaca. One naturally begins to ask what significance such a cave holds in Homer's imagination, as described in the following lines. At the harbour's head stands a slender-leafed olive, and nearby a shadowy and graceful cave, sacred to the Naiad nymphs. Inside are jars and mixing vessels of stone where bees deposit their honey. There, too, are great looms of stone where nymphs weave garments dyed in sea purple, a marvellous sight. Water flows within unceasingly. The cave has two entrances, one facing north, which mortals may enter. The other to the south, which is for the gods alone. Mortals do not pass through this gate. It is reserved for the immortals. Geographical scholars have pointed out that Homer does not seem to be referencing a well-known or real location, as traditional accounts of Ithaca mention no such cave, a view also expressed by Cronius. Yet, it is difficult to imagine Homer simply inventing such a place and expecting his audience to believe that someone had actually created separate entrances on the island, one meant for humans and the other for divine beings. And if not human hands, then did nature itself assign one route to mankind and another to the gods? The world, after all, is shared by mortals and immortals alike, and this mysterious cave in Ithaca hardly persuades us that it genuinely includes one path leading down for men and another leading up for the gods. After highlighting these points, Cronius goes on to argue that it is evident, not only to scholars but also to the average person, that the poet is speaking allegorically here, using these verses to hint at something deeper. He compels us to raise questions such as, what exactly is meant by a gate for men and one for gods? And what is the significance of this cave with two entrances, sacred to the nymphs, and described at once as beautiful and gloomy? Surely, that which is murky and shadow-filled is far from lovely. It tends instead to evoke fear. We are also led to wonder why the cave is said to belong to nymphs in general, and then more precisely to those called naiads. Moreover, what purpose do the craters and amphoras serve in the passage? There's no mention of their contents, only the strange detail that bees fill them with honey, as if they were hives. The large looms, one might assume, are votive offerings to the nymphs, but why are they, too, made of stone, like the craters and amphoras? Why not of wood or some other usual material? Even these details, Cronius says, are among the less puzzling. What defies belief even more is the idea that the nymphs, divine beings, are weaving garments dyed in sea purple on these stone looms inside a dark cave. It is not just astonishing to imagine, but strange even to hear described, that goddesses should be engaged in such work in such a place, producing fabric of a specific and noble colour, which is visible to others. Further, we must confront the curious design of the cave itself. It has two gates, one assigned as a descending path for mortals, the other as a way for gods, with a human path oriented to the north and the divine path to the south. This division, assigning the north to mankind and the south to deities, is a mystery in itself. Why not east and west? After all, most sanctuaries are built with their doors and statues facing east, so that when worshippers approach, they face west in the presence of the gods. Given the many layered oddities in this passage, Cronius determines that the description cannot be dismissed as mere poetic invention for entertainment, nor accepted as a straightforward geographical report. Instead, Homer must be speaking in symbols. Even the presence of the olive tree beside the cave seems to carry hidden meaning. According to Cronius, as Porphyry points out, ancient thinkers considered it a great challenge to interpret all these elements, and now it is up to us to make sense of them too, by drawing on both the insights of earlier interpreters and our own understanding. To begin with, when it comes to the location described, those who have dismissed the cave and its depiction as mere poetic invention appear to have done so with insufficient care. Some of the most reliable and thorough geographical writers do in fact mention the site, most notably Artemidorus of Ephesus. In the 5th book of his multi-volume work, he writes, 12 stadia of Cephallenia, going from the harbour of Panormus, lies the island of Ithaca, narrow and conspicuous, with a harbour called the harbour of Phorcys. There is also in this harbour a beach where the sacred cave of the Nymphs is located, where it is said Odysseus was put ashore by the Phaeacians. This clearly indicates, according to Porphyry, that the cave is not an entirely fictitious creation of Homer. Whether the poet depicted it exactly as it existed, or whether he elaborated or added symbolic detail, the interpretive challenges remain. These difficulties persist whether one is trying to discern the intentions of those who originally consecrated the site or of the poet who adapted or preserved the account. In antiquity, those who established sacred spaces would not have done so without embedding symbolic meaning in them, nor would Homer have rendered such a description without care or deeper purpose. If one aims to demonstrate that the description of the cave did not originate with Homer, but instead stems from those earlier devotees who consecrated the space to divine powers, then one must recognize that the dedication itself reflects ancient wisdom, and therefore calls for serious investigation, along with symbolic interpretation of its ritual significance. The ancients often chose caves and hollows as fitting places for sanctity, dedicating them to the cosmos as a whole or to its particular parts. They handed down the teaching that the earth itself stood as a symbol of the primordial substance from which the cosmos arose. Some even identified earth directly with that primal matter. Likewise, they saw caves as emblematic of the cosmos formed from that underlying material. For, in general, caves possess a distinctive character of their own, yet one that remains inseparable from the earth, being formed of the same stone, hollowed within, yet externally bound to the earth's expanse. In the same way, the cosmos has a nature of its own while being inseparably linked to matter. They used stone and rock as symbols of this matter, precisely because they resist form and do not easily yield to shaping. For the ancients, matter was infinite, not in the sense of boundless size, but because it lacks defined form. Given that matter is always shifting and on its own, lacks the form that brings structure and clarity, they saw the moisture, the damp air, and the gloominess of caves, what Homer describes as their murkiness, as apt representations of matter's properties. The cosmos, they believed, is veiled in darkness and confusion because of matter, and it is through the introduction and fusion of form, the shaping principle that gives structure and order, that the world becomes radiant and beautiful. This interplay, the meeting of form and matter, gives rise to what we call cosmos, a term signifying order and adornment. A cave, then, can fittingly be called lovely, when it is regarded from the standpoint of someone who encounters it and sees in it a reflection of the forms. On the other hand, it may be called murky by one who looks into its depths with the mind's eye and grasps the more hidden meaning. So, when viewed outwardly and with surface perception, it appears lovely, but when examined inwardly and with insight, it becomes murky. Similarly, the Persian initiatory rites lead their participants through teachings about the soul's descent and eventual ascent, and the space in which this process is enacted is often called a cave. Eubulus reports that Zoroaster was the first to dedicate a natural cave located in a mountainous region near Persia, filled with flowers and springs, to Mithras, the maker and divine source of all. For him, the cave stood as a likeness of the world Mithras brought into being. The items arranged within the cave followed a deliberate pattern, each representing elements and regions of the cosmos. After Zoroaster, this practice of conducting sacred rites within caves, both naturally formed and human-made, became widespread among others. Just as people established temples and sanctuaries for the celestial gods, and hearths for offerings to underworld powers and heroic spirits, and even constructed pits and subterranean spaces for deities dwelling beneath the earth, they also began to set aside caves and grottos for honoring the universe itself. These spaces were also dedicated to the nymphs, due to the waters that flow into and emerge from them. The naiads, as will be discussed shortly, are the particular nymphs who preside over such flowing waters. The cave thus served not only as a representation of the visible and created universe, but also as an emblem of the hidden powers. Because caves are shrouded in darkness, they mirror the nature of these unseen forces. This symbolic link is reflected in mythology as well. Kronos is said to have crafted a cavern deep within the sea to conceal his children. Demeter, too, is said to have raised Korae within a cave in the company of nymphs. And if one surveys the writings of the ancient theologians, one will encounter numerous similar examples. A hymn devoted to Apollo makes it evident that caves have long been consecrated to the nymphs, particularly to the naiads, who are associated with springs and are named for the flowing waters from which streams emerge. The hymn states, "They who live in caves in the earth, nursed to divine utterance by the inspiration of the muse, have made springs of the water of wisdom flow for you, and break through the earth in all the glens, bringing to men the unceasing flow of their sweet streams." Porphyry points to this tradition as the origin of the idea, taken up by the Pythagoreans and later by Plato, of likening the cosmos to a cave or a grotto. In Empedocles, the guiding forces of souls declare, "We have come here within this roofed cave." And Plato, in the well-known allegory in the Republic, describes a scene as follows. Picture mankind living in a subterranean dwelling in a cave, with an entrance open to the light and a long path extending the entire length of the cave. To which the other replies, "This is a bizarre image," and Socrates continues, "Dear Glaucon, this image is to be applied to everything that has been said up to this point, comparing the place we live, as we experience it with our eyes, to the underground prison, and the light of the fire, that is in the cave, to the power of the sun." This reinforces the point that theologians regarded caves not only as representations of the physical universe and its powers, but also as symbols of the noetic realm, though their reasoning varied. They took caves as images of the perceptible world because of their darkness, stone-like nature, and dampness, all qualities reflecting the traits of matter, which is unstable, unformed, and resistant to shaping. In contrast, caves symbolized the intelligible cosmos because they defy immediate sensory comprehension, while being structurally solid and enduring. For the same reasons, caves were also seen as representations of obscure and fragmentary powers, particularly those entwined with matter. These associations stemmed not from the shape of caves, as has been mistakenly assumed, since caves are not always spherical, but from their inherent qualities, their natural formation, darkness, shadowed depths, and stony substance. When a cave has two openings, such as the one Homer famously described, it was considered symbolic not of the intelligible world, but of the visible and material one. The cave in question here, known for its continuously flowing water, would likewise not signify the higher noetic order, but the realm of material existence. This is also why the site is sacred to the naiads, whose very name derives from their connection to flowing waters, rather than to mountain nymphs or those associated with peaks or heights. The Greeks also used the name naiad nymphs, particularly to refer to the forces governing the waters, and the ancients extended this term more broadly to indicate the category of souls that descend into the realm of generation. They imagined that these souls rested upon the waters, which were considered to be divinely animated. As Numenius points out, referencing the scriptural phrase, the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. In line with this, the Egyptians are said to have represented all their deities as not standing on solid ground, but journeying by boat, the sun included among them, symbolizing souls entering the realm of becoming and hovering above the waters. Numenius further connects this to Heraclitus, who says, "It is a delight, not a death, for souls to become wet," suggesting that souls find joy in descending into matter. Elsewhere, Heraclitus observes, "We live their deaths while they live our deaths," implying a mutual inversion between the soul's true life and its immersion in the physical. The poet similarly describes the souls in the generative realm as wet, because their nature is suffused with dampness, drawn toward blood and seed, just as plant souls depend on water for nourishment. Some have held that the celestial and aerial bodies are sustained by the vapors rising from waters and rivers, exhalations that feed the heavens. According to the Stoics, the sun derives sustenance from the evaporation of the sea, the moon from the moisture of springs and rivers, and the stars from the rising of earthly vapors. The sun was thus viewed as a fiery intelligible mass nourished by the ocean, the moon as similarly sustained by river waters, and the stars by the earth's breath. Souls, whether still incarnate or only recently separated from the body but clinging to corporeality, are said to be drawn irresistibly toward moisture. This tendency is most pronounced in those souls on the brink of embodiment. As they are moistened, they are drawn into generation. This also accounts for the way souls of the dead respond to the offerings of blood and bile, and for why souls bound to the body trail behind them a misty vapor, which condenses like a cloud. Moisture in the air becomes visible when it thickens, and so too do such spirits take form, appearing visibly due to their excess dampness. From such souls emerge the apparitions that at times appear before people, coloring and shaping their forms in accordance with the fantasies of those perceiving them. Yet the souls that remain pure avoid becoming altogether. As Heraclitus remarks, a dry soul is wisest. That is, here in this world, spirit becomes saturated through its desires, especially sexual desire, and the descending soul carries with it a moist vapor drawn from its movement toward birth. Souls entering the realm of becoming are therefore likened to naiad nymphs, and for this reason, brides are traditionally called nymphs, as they are entering into marriage for the purpose of generation. Water from springs, rivers, or ever-flowing fountains is poured upon them in ritual, reflecting this entry into material existence. For souls entering embodiment, as well as for the divinities governing generation, the cosmos is regarded as sacred and delightful, despite its essential gloom and obscurity. These beings are therefore imagined to be mist-like, composed of vapor or airy substance. This is why the fitting place for them on earth is a cave, a charming and shadowy cavern that mirrors the nature of the cosmos itself, where souls reside as in a vast temple. And such a cave is likewise fitting for the nymphs who rule over waters, for it contains water that is said to flow without ceasing. Let us, then, understand the cave in question as being consecrated to both souls and to the nymphs, especially to those lesser divine powers that govern flowing springs and streams, known as the Pegaean nymphs or spring nymphs, and also called naiads for that reason. But what symbols, Porphyry asks, can we identify that relate respectively to souls and to the watery powers, in order to argue that this cave was a shared place of dedication to both? We might point to the presence of stone craters and amphoras as signs referring to the nymphs of the waters. When these vessels are made from baked clay, they carry a connection to Dionysus, being closely tied to the vine, his gift to humankind, since the fruit of the vine matures by the heavenly fire. Yet when craters and amphoras are carved from stone, they are fitting symbols for nymphs who preside over water springing from rock. As for the souls descending into the realm of birth and generation, and the forming of bodies, what better emblem than the stone looms? This is why the poet dared to describe the nymphs as weaving on them sea-purple fabric, something astonishing to behold. Flesh is formed around bones and emerges through them, and since bones resemble stone in texture and hardness, stone becomes a fitting symbol for them. That is why the looms are said to be made of stone, not some other material. The sea-purple fabric clearly signifies flesh, which is woven out of blood. The purple wool, like flesh, originates in blood and even gets its coloring from substances derived from living creatures. In the same way, flesh is both produced by and composed of blood. Moreover, the body is indeed a garment that wraps around the soul, a wonder to behold, whether one considers the intricacy of its composition or the way in which it binds the soul. For this reason, Orpheus represents Kore, who oversees all things sown in the earth, as a weaver, and the ancients even spoke of the sky as a kind of garment or robe, cast over the gods in heaven like a cosmic covering. But why, then, are the amphoras not filled with water, but instead with honeycomb? It is said that bees store their reserves in them, and the expression meaning to store food is derived from the words for nourishment and putting away. Since the food of bees is honey, the symbolism of honey carries many layers. Theologians have long used honey as a sign of complex properties, for it is both cleansing and preserving. It prevents many substances from decay and helps heal stubborn wounds. It is sweet, and it is collected from flowers by bees, who, interestingly, are believed to be born from cattle. In certain mysteries, such as the Lion Mysteries, honey is poured instead of water during rites of initiation, and the initiate is urged to keep their hands free from pain, corruption, or pollution. Because the initiate is being consecrated through the purifying fire, honey is chosen over water, which stands in opposition to fire. Honey is also used to purify the tongue of sin. And when honey is offered to the Persian deity as the preserver of fruit, its symbolic role as a substance that preserves is emphasized. On this basis, some have even suggested that honey is identical to nectar and ambrosia, the food of the gods, which the poet describes as being poured into the nostrils of the dead to keep them from decay. In this way, honey is elevated as divine nourishment. This explains why Homer also refers to tawny nectar, the color of honey, linking the two as sacred substances. Next, Porphyry points out that we can gain a clearer understanding by comparing other sources to determine whether honey and nectar are indeed to be taken as the same. In the teachings attributed to Orpheus, Zeus is said to have used honey to ensnare Cronos, who, after consuming it, became intoxicated to the point of helplessness, just as Poros did in Plato's tale, when he was overcome with nectar, since wine had not yet come into being. In Orpheus' account, it is Night who advises Zeus, saying, "When you see him stretched out beneath the tall oaks, drunk from the toil of the buzzing bees, bind him fast." This is precisely what befell Cronos. Overwhelmed by the sweetness, he fell into a stupor, and in that vulnerable state he was bound and castrated, just as Uranus had been before him. The theological implication here is that divine beings, even in their power, are susceptible to pleasure, which lures them downward into birth and generation, drawing their energies out of them, just as seed is expelled through desire. Thus Cronos, like Uranus, is overtaken by longing and seeks to unite with Earth, and it is during this very act of descending for union that he is castrated. In both stories, the seduction of honey mirrors the seduction of physical pleasure, the sweet lure that entangles gods in generation. In cosmological terms, Saturn, Cronos, is the outermost of the visible planets, positioned just below the heavens. Powers descend from above, and Saturn is the first to receive them directly from the celestial realm, passing them down in turn to Jupiter or Zeus. Within this descending chain, honey becomes a fitting symbol due to its associations with cleansing, preservation, and the delight of incarnation into the flesh. It signifies purity and transformation, and thus suits the water nymphs, reflecting both the purity of the waters under their guardianship and their role in generation, for water itself is essential to birth and becoming. This explains why bees are said to store honey in craters and amphoras. These vessels are not randomly chosen. Craters themselves represent springs, as seen in the imagery of Mithras, beside whom a crater stands to symbolize a sacred spring, and amphoras, similarly, are used to draw water up from such sources. Springs and flowing streams are fitting domains for the water nymphs, and even more so for those nymphs who are also souls. The ancients sometimes referred to these souls as bees, because of their eagerness and diligence in seeking out delight. It is in this spirit that Sophocles, with deep insight, once wrote, "The swarm of the dead buzzes and rises up, as though the souls of the departed were gathering like bees." The priestesses of Demeter were also called bees, being servants of the goddess of the underworld, and Cora herself was given the name Melatodes, meaning honey-like. The moon, too, which governs the cycles of becoming and birth, was at times referred to as the bee, for various reasons, including the tradition that the moon is also named Bull, and its exaltation lies in Taurus, the sign of the bull. Since bees were believed to originate from cattle, the symbolism is layered and deliberate. In the same way, souls that descend into generation are seen as being born from cattle, and the deity who covertly resists the process of becoming is known as the cattle thief. Honey was also taken as a symbol of death, which is why offerings of honey were poured out to the deities of the underworld. In contrast, bile came to represent life, suggesting that the soul's vitality fades through pleasure but is rekindled by bitterness. Offerings of bile were likewise given to the gods, either for the same symbolic reason or because death was seen as a release from pain, while life in the world was full of hardship and bitterness. The ancients did not refer to all souls entering into generation as bees, but only those destined to live justly and return again after having done what pleases the gods. This is because bees naturally seek to return to their origin and are noted for their calmness and moderation. In this sense, libations of honey were considered sober offerings. Furthermore, bees avoid the flowers of fava beans, which the ancients interpreted as a sign of the direct and unbroken course of generation. Fava bean plants are almost alone among seed-bearing vegetation in having stems that are hollow and uninterrupted by nodes. In this way, both honeycombs and bees became appropriate symbols for the water nymphs, and also for souls who become brides as they enter the process of becoming. Before the gods were honored in temples, early people consecrated natural places to them, especially caves and grottos. The Kures in Crete dedicated a cave to Zeus, and in Arcadia similar spaces were devoted to Selene and to Lycaean Pan. On Naxos there was a cave for Dionysus. Likewise, wherever Mithras was worshipped, his rites were performed in a cave. In his description of the cave on Ithaca, Homer doesn't merely note that there are two entrances. He specifically says that one faces the north and one the south. The northern entrance is described as being for descent, while the southern entrance is not for men to pass through, but is instead a way for immortals. Whether the poet is recording a real custom or offering a symbolic image, we must examine the deeper meaning behind this cave. According to thinkers like Numenius and Cronius, the cave stands as a representation of the cosmos. The two extremities of the heavens, marked by the summer and winter turning points, correspond to the two entrances of the cave. The summer turning point lies in the constellation of Cancer, which is close to the earth and linked with the moon, the heavenly body nearest to us. The southern turning point lies in Capricorn, aligned with Saturn, the most distant and elevated of the visible celestial bodies, as the South Pole itself remains unseen. From Cancer onward, the signs proceed through the houses of the planets in the order of their influence: Leo as the domain of the Sun, Virgo of Mercury, Libra of Venus, Scorpio of Mars, Sagittarius of Jupiter, and finally Capricorn of Saturn. Reversing the path from Capricorn leads through Aquarius, Saturn, Pisces, Jupiter, Aries, Mars, Taurus, Venus, Gemini, Mercury, and back again to Cancer belonging to the Moon. This celestial arrangement, traced through the cave's symbolism, presents a cosmic map of ascent and descent, a path for souls journeying between birth and immortality. The tradition of calling the tropics in Cancer and Capricorn gates goes back to early theological teachings, though Plato uses the term mouths to describe them. According to Numenius and Cronius, the gate associated with Cancer is where souls descend, and that of Capricorn is where they ascend. Cancer lies to the north and is fitting for descent, while Capricorn lies to the south and is suited for ascent. The northern part of the cosmos belongs to souls making their way into becoming, and the northern gate of the cave is, fittingly, the path by which mortals descend. The southern part, by contrast, does not belong strictly to the gods, but rather to those souls ascending toward the divine. Homer reflects this when he does not say the southern entrance is for gods, but for immortals, a word that applies equally to souls, understood as immortal either by essence or by nature. Numenius and Cronius add that Parmenides also refers to the two gates in his work on nature, and that knowledge of them was familiar to both the Romans and Egyptians. The Romans, for instance, celebrate the Saturnalia when the sun reaches Capricorn. During this festival, slaves are treated as free people, and property becomes communal for a time. This symbolic reversal is meant to show that through the heavenly gate of Capricorn, through Saturn's time and Saturn's domain, those bound in the hardships of generation are released, as if receiving another life or rebirth. The Romans therefore regarded Capricorn as a gate of ascent, and the name they gave to a gate, Ianus, reflects this. Their first month, January, is named after this gate, marking the sun's turning back and beginning its rise from Capricorn toward the north. In contrast, the Egyptians began their year not in Aquarius, as the Romans did, but in Cancer. This was because the star Sothis, known to the Greeks as Sirius or the dog star, rises near Cancer. The rising of Sothis marked the first day of the Egyptian year and signaled the movement of becoming into the ordered cosmos. This, too, explains why Homer did not describe the cave's entrances as lying toward the east and west, nor aligned with the equinoxes in Aries and Libra, but instead oriented them to the north and south, positions that align with the extreme gateways of heaven. For the cave is sacred to souls and water nymphs, and these regions are fitting for the entrances and exits of the soul's journey, its birth and rebirth. The ancients also associated Mithras with the equinoctial points. He carries a sword, symbolizing Aries, the sign ruled by Mars, and rides a bull, which is linked to Venus and to Libra. In this way, Mithras stands as both a bringer of creation and a ruler of becoming. His cosmic alignment lies along the celestial equator, with the north at his right and the south to his left. The torchbearer quartz is placed to the south, signifying heat, while Cotopate stands to the north, marking the chill of the northern winds. In the same spirit, the ancients attributed certain winds to the soul's entry into and exit from becoming, believing that souls either carried spirit with them or were of a nature similar to it. The north wind, in particular, was considered suited to souls entering into generation. Thus, at the moment of death, this cold wind is said to breathe upon those passing away, reviving them even as they are dying, while the south wind, in contrast, undoes them. The colder breeze binds them, freezing them in the grip of earthly birth, while the warmer wind loosens them and lifts them back toward the divine warmth above. Because human habitation is largely concentrated in the northern region of the world, it follows that those conceived within this sphere would be touched by the north wind, while those departing would be carried away by the south wind. This also explains why, as Porphyry writes, in the regions he inhabits, the north wind is intense from the outset. It strikes quickly and directly, as its origin is near, whereas the south wind, beginning from a greater distance, gains strength gradually and is at its most violent before it finally subsides. Since the soul's path into becoming is aligned with the northern gate, this wind has even been described as erotic in nature. Porphyry wants us to consider the tale of the divine stallion Boreas, who approached in equine form and impregnated the Mares, who then gave birth to 12 foals. Similarly, he is said to have seized Orythia and fathered Zets and Calais with her. On the other hand, because the south wind is aligned with the divine realm, it is customary for people to draw the veils in temples at midday. This practice follows Homer's guidance, for it is not fitting that mortals should approach the gods' sanctuaries from the southern side, a path meant instead for immortals. When the god reaches his zenith at noon, this moment and the southern direction are marked upon the temple door. Naturally, any gate was seen as sacred, and silence was required when passing through one. The Pythagoreans and Egyptian sages forbade speech while crossing a threshold, honoring the divinity who stands at the beginning of all things with quiet reverence. Homer, too, understood that doors were holy. He shows this when he describes Oeneus not holding out tokens of supplication, but instead grasping the solid doors themselves in plea before his son. He also speaks of the celestial gates, those guarded by the hours, which control the weather and the movement of clouds. These gates open and shut with the clouds, and the groaning sound they make is understood to be thunder, the voice of the heavens, issuing from those self-moving gates under the watch of the hours. Elsewhere, Homer mentions the gates of the sun, referring to the two extremes of its journey, Cancer and Capricorn. These gates are the points through which the sun moves as it descends from the north wind's home into the south, and then ascends once more. Cancer lies in the north, Capricorn in the south, and both are placed near the Milky Way, which, according to Pythagoras, is where the souls reside, the people of dreams, as he calls them. This celestial river of stars takes its name from milk, since souls are nourished by milk when they first enter into generation. And so, those who invoke souls offer libations of milk and honey, recognizing that souls are drawn into birth by the sweetness of delight. Milk, after all, is the first nourishment of life. Moreover, the southern lands produce bodies that are naturally smaller, as the intense heat in those regions dries and contracts the flesh, reducing both size and moisture. In contrast, the northern regions are home to large-bodied peoples, the Celts, Thracians, and Scythians being prime examples, where the earth is rich and damp, offering plentiful nourishment and abundant grazing land. Even the name of the north wind, Boreas, is said to derive from the word for nourishment, since nourishment means sustenance, and the wind that blows from a land overflowing with food is thus called nourishing. For this reason, the northern territories are well suited to the multitude of mortals caught in the cycle of becoming, while the southern lands are more fitting for the divine kind, just as the east is associated with the gods and the west with lesser divine beings. Because the natural world arises through difference and duality, things with two entries have often served as symbols of this. One may travel through the intelligible or the perceptible world, and within the perceptible, either by way of the fixed stars or the wandering planets, and again either along the road that leads to immortality or the one that ends in mortality. There is, accordingly, a central point above the earth and one below, a node in the east and another in the west. The world unfolds through oppositions, right and left, night and day, and so the whole of nature is stretched across this tension of contrasts, brought into harmony through them. Plato speaks of two mouths, one through which souls ascend to the heavens, and another through which they descend into the earth. The theologians, in turn, describe the sun and moon as the gates of the soul's passage, the ascent taking place through the sun, the descent through the moon. Similarly, Homer speaks of two jars from which gifts are given, one filled with blessings, the other with hardships, and in Plato's Gorgias, the soul itself is described as a jar, a container of both good and evil, rational in part, irrational in another. The image of the jar is apt, for the soul carries within it a mixture of dispositions and deeds. Hesiod offers a vision in which one of these jars remains closed, while the other is opened by desire and spills its contents into the world, leaving behind only hope. For those in whom the soul has become scattered and fragmented throughout matter, this remaining hope becomes its last support. So, in general, anything with two gates becomes a symbol of nature's structure, and the cave described here is no exception. It has not one entrance but two, each corresponding to a different aspect of the world, one aligned with divinity and the good, the other with mortals and the lesser. It is from this model that Plato fashions his image of the bowls, exchanging amphoras for jars, and his mouths for the dual gates. Pherecydes of Syros likewise speaks of holes and chasms, of caves and doors, using such symbols to express the births and rebirths of souls. And so, without adding unnecessary weight by drawing in further accounts from philosophers and theologians of old, it may be said that the essence of the interpretation has been sufficiently revealed in the examples already presented. Still remaining, as we all recognize, is the enigma surrounding the symbol of the planted olive tree, for it clearly implies more than it seems. It is not simply said to be growing nearby, but rather at the head, and indeed at the head of the harbour stands a slender-leaved olive tree, close to which lies a cave, not as a matter of coincidence, but as part of a deeper design, since it envelopes the mystery signified by the cave. For the cosmos did not emerge without cause or by mere accident, but came into being through the deliberation and intention of divine reason. Thus the olive, an emblem of divine forethought, has its place beside the image of the world, which is the cave. The olive tree belongs to Athena, and Athena signifies thoughtfulness and wise counsel. Given that the goddess was born from the head, it was fitting for the one who composed the myth to situate the tree at the head of the harbour, indicating that the universe did not arise through unreasoned happenstance, but through noetic will and wisdom. At the same time, the tree remains distinct from the cave, just as divine wisdom stands apart from the world, yet it is placed nearby, at the forefront of the entire harbour. The olive's evergreen nature makes it particularly suited to the cyclical wanderings of souls, to whom the cave is dedicated. In summer, its pale leaves turn upward, and in winter they shift again, revealing the tree's constant presence through changing seasons. This is why people hold out olive branches during prayers and pleas, hoping to turn the darkness of their afflictions into light. The olive, which remains green through all seasons, also provides aid in toil through its fruit. It is sacred to Athena, and crowns woven from its branches are given to victors in contests, just as its boughs are carried by those in supplication. By contrast, the cosmos is guided by a noetic principle, through a providence that acts perpetually, in a way that could be called evergreen as well. From that divine foresight comes both the reward for the victors in the arena of life and the relief from burdensome labor, and it is also from this source that pity is shown to the suffering and favor granted to suppliants. It is this same Creator who upholds the harmony of the cosmos. Homer tells us that all external possessions must be left in the cave, and that a person must be stripped down, taking on the appearance of a beggar, having worn down the body and set aside all excess, turning inward, away from the senses, to seek the counsel of Athena, seated beside the olive, and to learn how to cut away the ruinous desires that cling to the soul. In this, Porphyry says that he does not think Numenius and his followers were mistaken when they interpreted Odysseus in the Odyssey as a symbol of the human soul moving through the different phases of becoming, until finally returning to its rightful place among those beyond the reach of crashing waves and untouched by the knowledge of the sea. Those who, as Homer says, do not even season their food with salt, and know nothing of the ocean's turmoil. The expressions open sea, and wave crash are also used by Plato to refer to the material world. Porphyry believes the harbour called the Harbour of Phorcys, which Homer names as belonging to the old man of the sea, was chosen deliberately. At the outset of the Odyssey, Homer makes it clear that Thoosa, the daughter of Phorcys, is the mother of the Cyclops whose eye Odysseus later destroys. He includes this detail so that even as Odysseus draws near his home, there remains a trace, a subtle reminder, of his earlier transgressions. Therefore, the seat beneath the olive tree is a fitting symbol. Odysseus approaches it as a suppliant, appealing to the divine power that governs birth and becoming, offering prayers beneath the sacred branch. It was not within the natural order that Odysseus could shed the life of the senses simply by attacking it head-on. His attempt to end it through the blinding of the Cyclops was a kind of overreach. In response, he incurred the wrath of the gods connected to the sea and to materiality. These forces cannot be overcome through direct confrontation alone. They must be appeased, through sacrifice, through the long and bitter labor of the humble, and through endurance. Odysseus must, at times, face the passions head-on and defeat them. At others, he must outwit them, until he has fully detached himself. And even once he has discarded his rags and brought the passions to an end, his trials are not over. True liberation will only come when he has rid himself completely of the sea, not only in body but in memory, when the very notion of seafaring fades from his awareness, and he mistakes an oar for a winnowing fan, no longer even knowing what the sea is. This interpretation should not be dismissed as strained or imaginative conjecture, as if it were the product of fanciful minds trying to force meaning into a simple tale. When one considers the ancient wisdom underlying these texts, the extraordinary insight of Homer, and the perfection of his character in every virtue, it becomes difficult to deny that he subtly wove into his narrative allusions to deeper, more divine realities. It is unlikely that he composed the entire story without basing it on some profound truth. Let us, however, set aside any further commentary on this point for another occasion. With that, the explanation of the cave we have been considering reaches its conclusion.